Hey Reddit, my name's Jack, and I'm 27 now, but this story starts when I was 13. If you've ever wondered what it's like to grow up in a house where silence feels louder than shouting and love feels like something you have to earn, you might understand a little bit of what I went through. But I'll warn you, this one still hits a nerve for me. When I was a kid, my parents had this strange idea of tough love. My mom used to say, "We're not raising a boy, we're raising a man," as if saying that excused everything. My dad, on the other hand, didn't talk much. He just did things that made you wish he hadn't. I was the middle child between my older sister, Emily, and my younger brother, Ryan. Emily was the golden one. Perfect grades, perfect hair, perfect smile. She could break a vase, lie about it, and somehow I'd still end up being the one grounded. Ryan was the baby, and he knew it. My parents acted like he was a miracle child because mom had complications after him and couldn't have more kids. So yeah, golden child, miracle baby, and me. When you're the invisible one in a family, you start learning how to read the air. You pick up on things nobody says out loud. The disappointed sighs, the way your name sounds like an inconvenience when they call you. That was my childhood. I wasn't abused in the way most people picture it. No shouting matches or broken plates. It was quieter, colder, like living in a house that smiled for the neighbors and froze you out when the door closed. The day everything changed, the day they left me, was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. I'd gotten a B on my math test, which I was actually proud of, but my mom looked at the paper like it was a funeral notice. "B means you didn't push yourself," she said, her mouth tightening. My dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. Emily smirked, said something like, "He probably copied," and Ryan giggled because that's what he did. He followed her lead like she hung the moon that we were driving back from my aunt's place that day. The whole ride was tense because my mom and dad were mad I'd talked back to my uncle. I'd only said that I didn't want to try his beer, which apparently was disrespectful. My mom had that clipped tone, the one that meant she was done pretending for the day. "You embarrassed us, Jack," she said, not even turning around from the front seat. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" I remember looking out the window, watching the trees blur by, and thinking if I just stayed quiet long enough, maybe they'd stop being angry. That's how it always worked. Silence was safer than trying to defend myself. But then, my dad pulled over. We were on the side of the highway. Not a rest stop, not an exit, just a stretch of road with trees and gravel. I thought maybe he was checking something on the car. Instead, he turned around, looked right at me, and said, "You're old enough to walk home." I remember blinking, thinking it was a joke. I actually laughed. Wait, what? He didn't repeat himself. Mom just stared straight ahead, arms crossed. "Maybe a long walk will help you think about how you talk to people," she said. Emily snickered quietly. Ryan looked confused, but nobody said a word to stop them. I thought it was some kind of twisted lesson, like they drive a few yards, then come back. But when I got out of the car, my dad hit the gas and drove off. Just like that. I stood there, dust swirling around my sneakers, the taillights disappearing down the road that I didn't even cry at first. I just stood there, waiting. A few minutes passed, then a half hour. The sun dipped low and cars whooshed by without stopping. Eventually, I started walking. I didn't even know which direction to go. Home was miles away, and I didn't have a phone. I walked until my legs felt like lead, until the air got cold and the sounds of the highway turned into crickets and frogs. I ended up sleeping behind a gas station, using my backpack as a pillow. The guy working the night shift found me in the morning, gave me a bottle of water, and let me use the phone. I called the house. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. That was the last time I heard from them. No one came looking for me. No police. No missing posters. Nothing. I ended up staying with my friend's family for a while, then bounced around foster homes until I aged out. It wasn't easy, but I survived. I learned how to take care of myself, how to build a life from scratch. I didn't realize how strong I was until I didn't have anyone else to rely on. Fast forward to last week, 14 years later. I've got a steady job now, a small apartment, a decent life. I don't talk about my past much. Most people wouldn't believe it anyway. Then I got a letter in the mail. No return address. I opened it, and inside was an invitation to Emily's wedding. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The envelope had my name, written in that same careful, loopy handwriting my mom used to label our lunchboxes. My heart did this weird flip, like I was 13 again. waiting for someone to tell me it was all just a misunderstanding. But then I saw it. A small folded note tucked behind the invitation. It wasn't from Emily. It was from them. Don't make it awkward this time. That's all it said. No love, Mom and Dad. No apology. No acknowledgement of the 14 years of silence. Just those 5 words that I must have read that note 50 times, sitting at my kitchen table, the invitation shaking in my hands. I didn't even know where to start processing it. The audacity, after everything they'd done, to act like I was the one who could make things awkward. Like they hadn't left me on the side of a road like trash. And the thing is, part of me thought maybe I'd just ignore it. Maybe I'd toss the invitation and move on. But then, a memory hit me, one I'd buried deep. The way my mom smiled at Emily after that day, like she'd picked a side. The way my dad told people later that I'd run off because I couldn't handle discipline. That was when something inside me shifted. Not anger, exactly. More like a quiet, burning sense of clarity. If they wanted me not to make it awkward, well, maybe that was exactly what I was going to do. But before I get to that part, I should probably explain what kind of family I was dealing with. Because trust me, this wasn't just about one cruel moment on the highway. That was just the tip of the iceberg. When I was younger, my parents had a favorite family game. They called it Who's the Responsible One? It wasn't really a game. It was more like a test I could never pass. If Emily spilled something, I should have been watching her. If Ryan forgot his homework, I should have reminded him. Everything wrong in that house somehow circled back to me. I remember one Christmas when I was about 10. We were all opening presents. Emily got a new laptop. Ryan got a gaming console. I got socks. When I asked about it, Mom smiled and said, "You need to learn to be grateful for practical things." Dad added, "You'll appreciate it when you're older." That same year, Emily got a cake with her name written on it for her birthday. They forgot mine entirely. When I reminded them, Mom just said, "Oh, we'll celebrate next weekend." But we never did. Little things like that chip away at you. You start thinking you must have done something wrong, that maybe you deserve it somehow. But looking back now, I see it for what it was, control. They liked having someone in the house who made everyone else look better by comparison. After that note arrived, I spent 3 nights barely sleeping. I'd put the invitation on my table, look at it, then shove it back in the drawer. Over and over. My mind kept replaying that one sentence. Don't make it awkward this time. What did they even mean by this time? I hadn't seen them since I was a kid. Unless they'd told people a different version of the story. And that thought, that they might have rewritten the whole thing to make themselves look good, started to eat at me. So I did what any rational person with a buried past and a slow-building fire in their chest would do. I started digging. That's when things started getting interesting and messy. Very, very messy. When I got that wedding invitation, I thought the past was something I'd buried deep enough to never feel again. Turns out, all it took was 5 smug little words to dig it back up. Don't make it awkward this time. I couldn't stop replaying it. The way it implied I was the one who ruined things, that I'd been the embarrassment all along. It was so perfectly them. Rewrite history, smile for the cameras, pretend nothing ever happened. After a few sleepless nights, I decided I needed to know what exactly they'd been telling people. Emily's wedding invitation had an RSVP email, and in the digital age, that was my golden ticket. I created a throwaway email account and messaged, "Hi, I'm a friend of the family from out of town. Could I get details on accommodations for the wedding weekend?" The reply came from Emily herself. She wrote, "Of course. It'll be so wonderful to see everyone again. Mom and Dad have been working so hard to make this special." That one sentence hit me harder than I expected. Mom and Dad have been working so hard. I hadn't seen those words, Mom and Dad, used about my parents in so long. It almost felt foreign. I stared at the screen until the text blurred. I realized Emily had probably spent the past 14 years painting the perfect family portrait while I existed like a ghost in the background. I started looking through social media. It didn't take long to find Emily's Instagram. Perfectly curated, of course. Engagement photos on a beach. Captions about family is forever and blessed to have the best parents. There they were, my parents, smiling with their arms around her and Ryan. Dad had more gray hair. Mom looked softer around the edges, but their eyes were the same. Cold. Controlled. There wasn't a single mention of me. It was like I'd never existed. Scrolling through years of their lives felt like watching strangers in a movie where I'd been edited out of every scene. My sister graduated, got her degree, landed a corporate job, got engaged, all while my parents stood proudly behind her. I was never there, not even in the background. The caption under one picture nearly made me drop my phone. So proud of my amazing parents for raising us right. We wouldn't be who we are today without their strength and discipline. Discipline. That word twisted something in my chest. That was their favorite word when I was a kid. Discipline was why I spent birthdays grounded, why I missed field trips, why I walked home from the highway at 13. I couldn't just sit with that. I needed to see them, not to reconnect, but to understand I drove out to my hometown that weekend. It had been over a decade since I'd last been there. The place hadn't changed much. Same diner on the corner, same tiny park with the broken swing, same peeling paint on the library steps. But the house, that was different. My parents had renovated. The beige siding was now blue. There was a new car in the driveway, and the old oak tree where I used to climb and read had been cut down. I parked a few houses away and just sat there, watching. The blinds were open, and through the window, I could see them. My mother at the kitchen table, arranging flowers, probably for the wedding. My father was watching TV. He looked relaxed, almost gentle. It made my stomach turn. I wondered if they ever thought about me when they sat in that same room. Did they remember what they'd done? Did they ever feel guilty? Then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, Emily's car pulled into the driveway. She got out in a sleek coat, chatting on her phone. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but she was smiling. That same confident, careless smile I remembered. She rang the doorbell, even though it was her childhood home, and my mother opened the door like she was welcoming royalty. They hugged for a long time. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I drove away, but that image stuck with me. The perfect family reunion. Like the missing piece. Me had never belonged in the puzzle to begin with. When I got home that night, I knew what I needed to do. I wasn't going to show up and cause a scene. Not yet. I wanted to know just how deep their lies ran. So, I started reaching out to people from my past. The first person I called was my old neighbor, Mrs. Palmer. She used to babysit us when my parents went out. I found her number through a mutual friend on Facebook. When she picked up, she sounded surprised but happy to hear from me. "Jack? Oh my goodness, sweetheart, it's been so long. How are you?" I told her I was doing fine, that I'd made a life for myself. Then, cautiously, I asked if she'd kept in touch with my parents. "Oh, sure," she said. "I see them at church sometimes. They've really turned things around after all that trouble years ago." "All that trouble," I repeated, my pulse quickening. "Yes, when when you ran off." I nearly dropped the phone. "Ran off." She hesitated, her voice softening. "That's what your mother said. That you were having a rebellious phase, skipping school, being disrespectful. They said they tried to help you, but you left one day and didn't come back. Everyone felt so sorry for them, Jack. They said they searched for you, that they called the police." I couldn't even respond for a few seconds. My parents, the same people who hadn't lifted a finger to find me, had spent years pretending to be the victims. When I finally spoke, my voice came out low and tight. "Mrs. Palmer, they left me on the side of the highway. I didn't run away." There was silence on the line. Then a shaky, "Oh, Jack. I didn't know. I'm so sorry." We talked a little longer, but I barely heard her. My mind was buzzing. They hadn't just erased me. They'd rewritten me into a cautionary tale. The bad kid who ran away and broke their hearts. That night, I barely slept again. Every memory I'd ever suppressed came back sharper, angrier. Like the time Emily blamed me for losing her bracelet, and my dad made me mow lawns all summer to pay for it, only for her to admit months later she'd found it in her gym bag. Or the time Ryan shoved me down the stairs, and I got grounded for fighting. It was all the same story, over and over. Their precious kids could do no wrong, and I was the family scapegoat. As the wedding got closer, I learned more. Through mutual acquaintances online, I found out Emily had invited everyone from our old neighborhood, including teachers, family friends, even our old pastor. And from the snippets I read in comments and posts, it was clear she'd been telling her version of events too. Apparently, I was the brother who lost his way. Some even believed I'd gotten into trouble with the law. Others thought I'd run off to find myself. Every story painted my parents as the selfless saints who'd endured so much heartache. That's when I realized they hadn't invited me out of love. They'd invited me because I was a loose end, a potential embarrassment if I showed up on my own terms. That note, "Don't make it awkward this time," wasn't a warning, it was a command. A threat wrapped in politeness that I wasn't angry anymore. I was cold. Clear that I decided to attend the wedding. But not to celebrate that I wanted to see the people who'd erased me. I wanted to look them in the eyes and remind them that their ghost was still very much alive that I in the days leading up to it. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd look. I didn't want to yell or cause a scene. I wanted calm, poise, the kind of composure that makes people question everything they thought they knew. I'd let them hang themselves with their own lies. Then, a few days before the wedding, something happened that flipped everything upside down. I got a message from Ryan.it came through Facebook. A short, awkward note. Hey Jack, I know this is weird after all this time, but I heard you might be coming to Emily's wedding. Can we talk? My first instinct was to ignore it. Ryan had been the baby, the one they protected most. I'd spent years blaming him too, though he was just a kid back then. Still, seeing his name pop up made my stomach twist. Curiosity got the better of me. I replied, "What do you want to talk about?" He answered almost immediately, "Not here. Can we meet? Please. There's stuff I think you should know." That message sat on my screen for a long time. Part of me thought it was a setup. Another part of me, the one that still remembered him giggling when our dad left me by the road, wanted to hear him say, "WHY.so." I agreed that we met at a diner halfway between my city and my hometown. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He was taller, broader, with that same nervous smile he'd had as a kid. When he saw me, he stood up quickly. "Jack," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Man, it's been forever." We sat down. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't even know where to start. How about the truth?" I said that. He flinched a little. Then he nodded. "You deserve that." And what he told me next, what he'd known all along, was worse than anything I could have imagined. Ryan stared down at his coffee, stirring it long after the sugar had dissolved. His hands were shaking, just barely, and for some reason that scared me more than anything. I'd imagined this meeting 100 different ways, him defensive, smug, maybe even cruel, but not this. Not him looking like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Jack," he said finally, "you remember that day on the highway?" The words hit me like a cold wind. "Of course I do." He nodded slowly, his eyes flicking up to meet mine. I never told you what happened after you got out of the car." I felt my stomach knot. He took a shaky breath. "When Dad pulled away, Mom told him to stop. She said it was too far. But he didn't. He just kept driving." She started crying. "Emily told her to calm down, said you needed to learn a lesson. And Dad said, he said you'd come crawling back once you realized how good you had it." Ryan's voice cracked then. "But when you didn't come home, they panicked. Not because they were worried about you, but because they realized what people would think. So they made up that story. Said you ran away after a fight. Mom called the police, but she lied. Said you'd packed a bag. They told everyone they'd done everything they could, but that you were just a troubled kid. They let people pity them for years, Jack." I just sat there, silent. My pulse thudded in my ears. The diner felt suddenly too small, too bright. Ryan swallowed hard. I didn't say anything because I was a kid. I didn't understand. And then, after a while, they just acted like it never happened. Whenever I brought you up, they'd shut it down. "Don't upset your mother," Dad would say. "That's in the past. Emily, she never mentioned you at all. It was like you died." He looked up at me then, guilt etched deep in his face. "I'm sorry. I should have said something. I should have told the truth." For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt hollowed out. We talked for hours. He told me how Emily had turned into a carbon copy of our parents. Manipulative, calculating, obsessed with appearances. How the wedding wasn't about love, but about status. Her fiancé came from a wealthy family, and the whole event was more of a PR opportunity than a celebration. My parents, of course, were milking it for all it was worth, parading around as the proud, devoted couple who'd overcome family hardship. "They told everyone you might show up," Ryan said. "They said if you did, to just be polite and not encourage you." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Of course they did." He hesitated before continuing. "But I don't think they're happy, Jack. Dad's business is failing. Mom's been having health problems. They act like everything's perfect, but it's not. They're falling apart." That should have made me feel vindicated. Instead, it just made me tired. When we finally said goodbye, Ryan hugged me. It was awkward, stiff, the kind of hug you give someone you used to know but aren't sure you still do. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. But I want you to know, I see it now. Everything they did to you. It wasn't your fault. I drove home in silence. The highway lights blurred past like ghosts. I thought about that 13-year-old kid walking in the dark, and for the first time, I let myself cry for him. Not because he'd been abandoned, but because he'd survived it. The days after that meeting were strange. I felt unmoored, like the ground beneath my past had finally cracked open, showing all the rot underneath. For years, I told myself that if I just worked hard enough, built a life good enough, maybe I could outrun the hurt. But hearing Ryan's words made me realize I'd been running from myself. 2.so I stopped. I stopped running, stopped pretending I didn't care. I decided to start over. Not for them, not for revenge, but for me. It wasn't easy. Day 27. I didn't have much. A small apartment, a used car, a modest job at a construction firm. But I had something I hadn't recognized before: freedom. No one could take that from me anymore. I started therapy again. The first few sessions were rough. I wasn't used to talking about the past without shutting down. But little by little, I began to untangle the mess my parents had left behind. The guilt, the self-doubt, the belief that I wasn't worth staying for. My therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Carla, told me something I'll never forget. You didn't survive because they were wrong about you. You survived because you were right about yourself. That line stayed with me. At work, I started taking on bigger projects. I stopped shrinking myself. I'd always had a knack for design. I was the kid who used to sketch tree houses and model bridges in notebooks during math class, and one of my supervisors noticed. Within a year, I was promoted to project manager. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, honest work. For the first time, I was building something that couldn't be taken away from me. Around that time, I also reconnected with Mrs. Palmer. She'd been shaken after I told her the truth, and she wanted to make things right. She introduced me to her daughter, who ran a local youth center for at-risk teens. They were looking for volunteers to teach practical skills: carpentry, small repairs, basic budgeting. I signed up. The first time I stood in front of that group of kids, I was terrified. But as I started talking about how to measure, cut, and build something from nothing, I realized how much of myself I saw in them. The quiet ones who kept their heads down, the ones who joked too loud to hide the hurt. I didn't tell them my whole story, just enough to let them know I understood what it felt like to be left behind. Those Saturdays became the best part of my week. Helping those kids reminded me that the past didn't have to define me. It could fuel me. Every time one of them finished a project, no matter how small, I felt like a piece of that 13-year-old boy inside me healed a little more. Still, the wedding loomed in the background like a storm on the horizon. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, only that I couldn't avoid it forever. One evening, about a month before the big day, I got another message from Ryan. This time, it was a photo. It was a family group shot. My parents, Emily, her fiancé, Ryan, all smiling stiffly in a formal portrait for the wedding announcement. Beneath it, the caption read, "Family, the foundation that shapes us." Ryan had sent one line with the photo: "You should see what's behind that foundation." It made me laugh, but not in a good way, because I could see it, the cracks in their perfect image. And for the first time, I realized something. I didn't need to destroy them. They were already doing that themselves. My revenge didn't need to be loud or cruel. It could be quiet, poised, the kind that lets truth do the heavy lifting. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I kept rebuilding my life piece by piece. I saved money, fixed up my apartment, started sleeping through the night again. I even adopted a dog, a nervous rescue mutt named Milo, who refused to leave my side. He reminded me of myself in a way, cautious, skittish, but full of heart. Once you earned his trust. One night, I sat on the couch with Milo's head in my lap, that wedding invitation spread out on the table in front of me. I looked at the date, the address, the neatly printed RSVP line with my name misspelled as Jake. It felt like one final insult, or maybe a gift, a reminder that they still didn't really see me. But soon, they would, because I'd finally found my balance, the quiet kind that comes when you stop waiting for someone else to fix what they broke. I didn't need them to validate me. I didn't need them to feel sorry. I just needed them to remember. I circled the date on my calendar. And for the first time since that day on the highway, I felt calm. Centered. I wasn't the lost boy they'd abandoned anymore. I wasn't the invisible middle child or the family scapegoat. I was the man they made by leaving me behind. And they were about to find out what that really meant. The morning after I circled the date on the calendar, I woke up feeling lighter, like the air in my apartment had shifted somehow. For the first time in years, my past didn't feel like a weight pressing down on me. It felt like something I could use. The wedding was 3 weeks away. That gave me just enough time to think, plan, and decide exactly what kind of message I wanted to send. I wasn't looking to humiliate anyone, not in the childish, petty way they'd expect. I wanted the truth to come out on its own, in a way that couldn't be twisted or rewritten. But first, I needed information. Ryan and I had kept in touch since that diner meeting, though our messages were cautious, like two people rebuilding a bridge they weren't sure would hold. When I told him I planned on attending the wedding, he didn't seem surprised. "You really think that's a good idea?" he asked over the phone. "It's not about good," I said. "It's about right." He was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll help." That caught me off guard. "Help how?" He sighed. "You're not the only one who's tired of pretending. You should know, they've been telling everyone some new version of what happened. Mom's saying you ran away to live with a bad crowd, and that she's forgiven you." I let out a dry laugh. "Forgiven me?" "Yeah," he said. "She's been using it in her church group. Calls it her testimony. Tells people how her faith helped her move past the pain you caused." It was so absurd, I almost laughed again. My mother, using her own cruelty as a spiritual story arc. It was classic her. "Emily's been worse," Ryan continued. "She's telling people she invited you out of compassion. Says you've been struggling, and that she wanted to extend an olive branch." My grip on the phone tightened. "Compassion, that's what she's calling it." He hesitated. "Jack, they're going to paint you as the villain no matter what you do. You know that, right?" "I don't need to defend myself," I said. "I just need to show people who they really are." "Then I'm in," he said. "Tell me what you need." That was the start of the setup. Ryan was my quiet inside man. He still lived in the area and knew most of the people attending the wedding. Old neighbors, church friends, distant relatives who'd bought my parents' version of the story without question. He started sending me details. The seating chart, the schedule, even the layout of the venue. A lakeside country club, of course. Emily wouldn't have settled for less. Every piece of information was another puzzle piece clicking into place. I didn't want drama for the sake of drama. I wanted precision. I wanted my truth to unfold like a mirror slowly turning toward them, forcing them to look at a week before the wedding. Ryan told me there'd be a slideshow, a digital family memories presentation during the reception. Emily and her fiancé had asked my parents to provide old photos for it. Ryan sent me the file. When I opened it, my stomach clenched. There were dozens of pictures. Emily as a baby, Ryan's first birthday, family holidays, vacations, school plays. And just like on their social media pages, I wasn't in a single one. Not even cropped out. I simply didn't exist. That's when the idea hit me that if they wanted to erase me, I'd remind them exactly who they'd erased. Over the next few nights, I pulled out the few old photos I'd kept, the ones I'd carried through every foster home, every move, every stage of rebuilding my life. There weren't many, but they told the truth. One of me holding a handmade card that said "Happy Mother's Day," while Mom frowned in the background, clearly annoyed. Another of me at the park with a scraped knee, Emily laughing at me from the swings. One of me and Dad standing by the old oak tree. I was smiling. He wasn't that I scanned them, edited them lightly to bring out the color, and then added captions, short, simple ones. The forgotten one, the quiet one, the one left behind. Then I stitched them together into a short video. Nothing flashy, just clean and haunting. It started with a family photo from when I was about 6, the only one where we all looked happy, and ended with a photo of me now, grown, steady, looking directly into the camera. Underneath it, I added the line, "Every family has a story." Some just forget who they left out. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was meant to be undeniable. Ryan helped me figure out how to get it into the slideshow rotation. His plan was simple but risky. He'd swap the flash drive during setup at the venue. The presentation team wouldn't know the difference. It'd play automatically during the reception, right after my parents' carefully curated family tribute. Still, I wanted a backup plan, just in case. So I printed a few copies of the photos and captions, framed them, and slipped them into my bag. If anything went wrong, I'd make sure those frames found their way onto a few tables before the night was over. As the plan took shape, I started to feel something strange, not excitement, not exactly satisfaction, but a quiet, humming focus. Revenge wasn't about hurting them anymore. It was about reclaiming my own story. Meanwhile, Ryan started feeding me bits of gossip from the wedding prep. Mom had apparently taken over the event planning, driving everyone crazy with her need for perfection. Dad had been bragging about giving a big speech, a proud father's message. Emily was obsessing over the guest list, trying to outdo her fiancé's family in every way possible. They're stretched thin, Ryan told me. It's all about appearances. If anything goes wrong that night, they'll crack. Good, I thought. Let them crack. The Friday before the wedding, I drove down to the town again. I stayed at a cheap motel a few miles from the venue. Nothing fancy, but clean. I brought the flash drive, the photos, and an old suit I'd had tailored for work events. When I tried it on, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The boy who'd been left behind on a highway was gone. What stared back was calm, sharp, unflinching. That night, Ryan came by to go over the final details. He looked nervous. "You're sure you want to do this?" he asked that I nodded. "It's not about them anymore. It's about truth." He sighed. "Then tomorrow, we do it right." Before he left, he pulled something out of his jacket. A small, worn envelope. "Mom kept this," he said. "Found it in a box of old papers when I was helping them clean the garage last year." I opened it carefully. Inside was a folded piece of paper in my handwriting, shaky, childish. It was a note I'd written the night before they left me. It said, "I'll do better. I promise." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "I don't know why she kept it," Ryan said quietly. "But I thought you should have it." I nodded, slipping the note into my wallet. My throat burned. "Thanks." After he left, I sat on the motel bed staring at that note. I remembered writing it, sitting at my desk, the walls closing in, thinking if I just promised hard enough, they might finally love me. But that boy didn't need to do better. He needed them to do better. The next morning was the wedding. The sky was a perfect blue, the kind that feels almost artificial, the kind my mother would have called a blessing. I got dressed slowly, double-checking everything. As I adjusted my tie, I looked in the mirror and whispered, "You're not going there to burn it down. You're going there to reclaim it." The venue was already buzzing when I arrived. Luxury cars, manicured gardens, waiters carrying trays of champagne. The parking lot was full of people I vaguely recognized. Old neighbors, teachers, even a few faces from church. When I walked through the doors, conversations dipped for just a second. Heads turned. Recognition flickered in a few eyes, followed by polite confusion. It was clear most of them didn't expect me to show up, or even believed I still existed. And then I saw them. My parents. They were standing near the front entrance, greeting guests. Mom was in a pale lavender dress, pearls around her neck, that same polite smile fixed to her face. Dad looked older, heavier, but still carried that same stiff confidence. When they saw me, Mom's expression froze. Dad blinked like he was trying to place me. For a long, stretched-out second, none of us said anything. Then, in a voice that trembled just slightly, Mom said, "Jack." I smiled. "Hi, Mom. It's been a while." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You got the invitation." "I did," I said. "Thanks for including me." Before she could respond, Emily's voice cut through the crowd. "Jack." I turned. She looked stunning. Of course, designer gown, flawless makeup, the picture-perfect bride. For a second, something flickered across her face. Not joy, not even shock. Just annoyance. "Well," she said brightly, "this is a surprise. Happy to see me?" I asked lightly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. It's nice that you could make it." The tension between us was so thick, even the nearby guests felt it. My parents exchanged quick glances. Emily smoothed her dress, already shifting back into hostess mode. "We'll catch up later, okay?" she said, then turned to greet someone else. Ryan appeared behind her, giving me the slightest nod. The plan was in motion. I took a seat in the ceremony hall, surrounded by polite strangers and old ghosts. One thought echoed in my mind. This wasn't their stage anymore. And by the time the night was over, everyone here was going to know why. The moment I'd been waiting for arrived about 30 minutes into the reception. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the slideshow. My parents had proudly handed the USB to the event coordinator, beaming like the selfless saints they'd convinced everyone they were. Emily leaned over my mother's shoulder, whispering about the perfect timing of the first slide, some old photo of her as a toddler, obviously chosen to tug at hearts that I sat back calmly, letting the anticipation build. I had everything ready, my flash drive, loaded with the video I had painstakingly prepared over the past weeks. I didn't need to be dramatic. Truth has a way of doing the work for you if you let it. The first slides appeared on the big screen. Emily as a baby, Ryan at his first birthday, Mom and Dad posing with everyone else. My pulse was steady. I sipped my water quietly and watched the crowd react with smiles and ahs. I waited until just the right moment, until everyone was lulled into that predictable, polite enjoyment. Then I subtly signaled Ryan that he moved like a shadow, unnoticed, carrying the flash drive to the laptop hooked up to the projector. In a few silent gestures, he swapped it with the one my parents had brought. Everything was seamless. The next slide advanced, and then my story began. The screen flickered, and suddenly the images shifted. Photos of me appeared. The 13-year-old boy standing on the side of the highway, my scraped knee from the park, the homemade Mother's Day card Mom had never acknowledged. Each photo had a caption, short and deliberate, the forgotten one, the quiet one, the one left behind. That a subtle murmur went through the room. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. The images told the story that my parents and Emily had worked so hard to erase, the real truth. I watched as people leaned closer, whispering to each other, connecting the dots. Next came the final slide, a recent photo of me, grown, composed, staring directly into the camera. The words below glowed softly. Every family has a story. Some just forget who they left out. There was silence that I didn't have to say a word. Every eye in the room was on my parents, and I could see it in their faces. The tight smiles, the stiff postures, the panic in their eyes. For the first time in decades, their perfect facade cracked. They had no script for this. No way to spin it. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she set her champagne flute down. She looked around the room, noticing for the first time the subtle glances, the hushed whispers, the recognition in some of the older neighbors who had witnessed the truth but had been too polite to confront it before. Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. Dad's jaw tightened, then slackened, then tightened again. I could see the story of their lives, their carefully curated narrative, unraveling in real time. People began murmuring. I didn't know. So that's what happened, I thought. I sat calmly, letting the truth speak louder than any confrontation ever could. My heart was steady. My breath was even. For the first time in my life, I felt completely untouchable. Ryan sidled up beside me, whispering, "You've done it." I nodded. It's not me. It's the truth. And then the room shifted. Aunt Linda, one of the few family friends who had always quietly suspected my parents' behavior, stood up. "I've known Jack was telling the truth for years," she said firmly. "I just didn't know how to say it without causing a scene." One by one, others began speaking. Teachers from my childhood, old neighbors, distant relatives, people who had quietly held the memory of what really happened, started telling pieces of the story. Pieces my parents had erased, minimized, or twisted. My parents tried to interrupt, tried to explain, but no one listened. The floodgates had opened, and nothing they said could stop it. Emily, visibly shaken, looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Jack." I raised my hand calmly. "You don't need to explain. I'm just glad everyone else can finally see the truth too." My parents slumped into their seats, pale and silent. The grandeur of the wedding, the perfect arrangements, the expensive venue, all of it felt suddenly hollow, meaningless. All the careful planning, the polite social smiles, the perfect family image, gone. And yet, I didn't gloat. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. I simply watched as the truth unfolded, as their carefully constructed world collapsed quietly but irrevocably around them. I let the silence linger just long enough for it to sting to be why the time dinner was served. The dynamic had shifted completely. People approached me, strangers, friends, neighbors, to quietly thank me for sharing my side, to apologize for believing the version of events my parents had sold. Conversations swirled around the room in hushed tones about loyalty, family, and the importance of seeing the truth. My parents sat frozen at the head table, unable to reclaim any control. Emily tried to regain composure, but her smile was strained, forced. She couldn't undo the slide, couldn't erase the captions, couldn't spin the story she had worked her whole life to perfect. Later, As the evening drew to a close, I quietly slipped out. No dramatic exit. No announcement. Just me, my bag over my shoulder, Milo trotting happily beside me. I walked into the cool night air, the lights of the reception glowing behind me like a reminder of what had been and what had ended, that I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense, humiliation or confrontation. I had given them something infinitely worse, the truth, the revelation of who they really were, and who I had become despite them. That I got into my car, and for the first time in decades, I smiled without any trace of bitterness. The long journey, from that 13-year-old boy left on the side of the highway, to the man who walked calmly into a room full of people who thought he didn't exist, had finally reached a point of quiet, undeniable justice. As I drove away from the reception, city lights replacing the country club, I thought about the note Mom had sent 14 years ago. Don't make it awkward this time. That I thought about the way Emily had smiled, the way my parents had acted like saints, the careful lies they'd spun for everyone else. And I realized something. They hadn't needed me to make it awkward. The truth had done it all on its own. And as the wind brushed against my face, I whispered to myself, just quiet enough to hear, just loud enough to mean it. I came back. I showed up. And now I'm free. The past was behind me, the story finally mine. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving.